Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? With the average American marriage lasting 8.5 years, the same as it was 100 years ago, is there such a thing as living happily ever after? With me is Dr. Linda Miles, couples therapist, who's going to talk about her new book, The New Marriage. Linda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Do women expect more from a relationship than a man?
I think we expect different things.
Okay.
And I think our expectations are getting really crossed up.
In what
And
way?
let me tell you what I mean. Women now expect men to be emotionally present for them. They expect them to understand that when they're ventilating, as women do, that what we want is somebody to be really supportive. Men want to fix it because that's what they've always done. They want them to understand how it is to really deal with emotions. A lot of these poor guys were taught by their coaches never to deal with emotions. I mean, Barry, what happens if you're playing t-ball and you start crying if you strike out?
That's not good. That's
You're
not manly.
ridiculed, okay? So we bring young people together, and the women want the men to be emotionally present, and the men want to have a beautiful, loving wife who is going to do tasks for them.
Task?
Like cook, like things their mother did. Now, in many relationships, this is beginning to change. However, in lots, it's still there, and I am seeing so much fallout. Oh, Barry, what I'm seeing is a lot of women who stay about 8 years, and they pretend they're okay. And they get up every morning and they say, today I'm going to make it all right. And today he's going to get it. But you know what? He hasn't learned how to do it. So then she's over it, and the relationship ends for her. So they come to my office and she says, it's over. And he's crying.
And he has no clue.
He has no clue. I thought you were happy. I'm happy. This is all this is what he expected. She's there. She looks good. He's happy. And I don't mean to minimize that, and I don't want to be overly stereotyped, but I want to say that we've got a real problem with expectations. And the other problem we have with expectations is everybody's expecting more now. 100 years ago, when you said till death do us part, that meant you were going to live together for about 8.5 years. And Barry, we had, as women, lots of babies. And every time we had a baby, we put our life on the line. We didn't have hospitals. If we got an infection, we died. There was no penicillin. Or the man that we were with died from infectious diseases or Indians or whatever, okay? So we didn't have to relate to each other. Who do you think the women were hanging out with?
Other women.
Other women and children. Who were the guys hanging out with?
Other men.
That's right. So now we say, okay, now for all these eons, you men have been out there together, and you women have been with the children and each other relating. Now let's bring you together, turn you towards each other, and you're going to meet all of each other's needs, and you're going to live happily ever after.
Huh?
That's right.
Well, let's move on to what are the top 5 causes of marital strife?
Well,
Or couple strife, not even marital. Let's just say couple strife.
Yeah, there's research on that. There's a wonderful researcher in Seattle named Dr. John Gottman, and he was a physicist who became a marriage and family therapist. So he was a researcher first, and he has wonderful research skills. He talks about what he calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Okay, and they are.
These are the behaviors that lead to the death of a relationship. Criticism, where you criticize that person as a person. I don't mean complaining, like, gee, I wish you would have brought the laundry in. It's criticism, you're lazy, okay?
All right.
Second is contempt. Now, let me just say a word about contempt. Contempt, the kind of people that I see bright couples. They can show contempt for each other with one eyelash almost, or with an eyebrow, or with they can sit at a table and no one else is noticing how contemptuous they're being of each other. But they know exactly what to say and do. And perhaps one of them is turned just a little away from the other one. And perhaps he just forgets to talk to her all evening. Or perhaps she's talking to some good-looking guy on the other side of her, okay? All of this has a very cumulative effect. The teenagers call it being dissed. It's like you get dissed until you're finished off, okay? Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, where you're not really listening to each other, you're just defending your own position. And because I see bright couples, I see masters of defense. If they were criminal attorneys, and some of them are, they would win their case. But that's not the point, okay? Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. You just put up a wall, and it's invisible, and they can't get through it. And
so why are they still married if they have all this contempt and
they're not.
Ah, okay.
Those things lead to divorce. And unfortunately, Barry, in my book, I say, I don't think we should celebrate people living together for 50 years and being married and give them a big party when they hate each other.
Well, that's true. Well, what are the benefits of marriage?
Oh, there are many, many benefits, which is why I wrote this book, because as a marriage and family therapist, I see people when marriages are ending, not when they're beginning. And I said, wait a minute. The benefits are so great. Financially, you save so much more money. Believe it or not, you have a much better sex life when you're married. You know why?
Because you don't have to worry.
You don't worry, you know, you get everything straight. And you're not so anxious, like this brand new person, I have to take off my pants, you know. So, much better sex life, much better for children, much better for your continuity. It's extremely disruptive to go through serial relationships. It takes a lot of energy.
Well, that's all some people know. But are we conscious of the baggage that we bring from our childhood or other relationships into the new relationship?
Some people are, if they've been through therapy or if they've really thought about it. Many people that I see think that they are the absolute cupcake of the century and that they have married an idiot, okay? And they go tell their friends what their partner does. And their friends go, he must be horrible because you're just the sweetest thing, Barry. How could he mistreat you? But you don't see what you do. You don't see what you bring to the table. My friends don't believe how low I can sink in my arguments with my husband. That's because in my family, my unfinished baggage is that my mother she just didn't understand me. She's a lovely person, but I tell you, we are so different. My dad's Italian, New York Italian, as a matter of fact. And my mother is from South Georgia, and she's Scotch-Irish.
Wow.
I grew up in Florida, but I'm New York Italian. I am so much like his family. And she's like, who are you? So I get so upset if I don't feel heard. And I get mean. I get mean-spirited.
So what do you do about that, just out of curiosity?
We talk about it. And he says, Linda, you're getting very mean. You know, you're acting cruel. And I'm willing to look at myself. In our book, we call it subpersonalities. And he's got this real mean character called Buck.
Your husband?
Yes. And he calls mine Nadine. And I say, you know, if you keep talking like Buck, you're going to see Nadine. Would you like to talk to her? She's obnoxious, Barry.
Well.
Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't know it, would you? You think I'm really sweet. And you know what? That's what a lot of people think their friends are. And we just feel it when we go, oh. And let me just say something about that. It makes me really upset that my clients get most of their relationship advice from people with bad relationships.
Oh, that's even better.
That's who tells them. They say, oh, kick him out, you know, whatever. But you know why? Because people with good relationships don't give advice. You have to go find them and ask them. They're not out there giving free advice or trying to fix you.
Basically, our relationship skills develop when we're in the womb.
Yes.
Then if that's so, how come the age of 4 is so critical in developing who we are in our skills?
Okay. In the womb, we now know that our brain is developing and that fetus from a very early age is affected by stress hormones in the mother. So if the mother has a stressed out pregnancy, that baby may become stressed out when it's born. I won't even go into drugs and alcohol, fetal alcohol syndrome, blah, blah, blah. But there are many things that are already minuses by the time the baby's ever born. 4 years old is critical. Here's why 4 years old is critical, okay? 4-year-olds are learning enough about the world that they still have this baby part, but they have this part that's full of it, that thinks they really know. So it makes them obnoxious sometimes because they're trying to act like they know, but they don't really know. And bless their hearts, they're old enough to feel like they should know how to do something. So if you tell them you should have known how to do that, they believe you. And then they get this sense of, ooh, I'm not going to ask questions because I should already know how to do it. Let me give you some examples of good parents with 4-year-olds, okay? Just so I'm going to make it real concrete for you. And by the way, the research is these kinds of parents have children who are more socially successful and more academically successful.
Oh,
probably because they're less anxious, okay? But what those parents do that's different is they take the child from their feelings to thinking about it. And what they're really doing is taking them from their emotional brain to their frontal lobe, where you solve problems. We used to not know what the heck they were doing, but now we know what they're doing is they're training that child not to just act out emotions without looking at the consequences. So here's a good example. I remember a neighbor of mine, and I was walking by. She was the best mother, Barry. I mean, I just admired her. She had 3 boys under 4. And so she's like holding the baby. She's got another little toddler. And Alex, the 4-year-old, has thrown himself in the carport throwing a fit. And so as I walk by to get the mail, she says to me very calmly, like Mother Teresa, but she's really talking to him. She goes, well, I guess you notice Alex is really upset. I'm like, I'm sure the whole neighborhood notices Alex is upset. And she goes, you know, we came home and they had those yellow Post-it notes when you get a present at Christmas. And this was in January. And I explained to Alex that this was just a note someone left us because it's not Christmas anymore. But, you know, he's very upset about it. So what she was doing was saying to him indirectly through me, get over it, Alex. I understand what you feel. You're disappointed. You didn't get a present. Santa Claus didn't come. But guess what? You're going to have to deal with it.
That's miraculous. Now, at this particular stage, it's also the magical stage where they're thinking about fairy tales and they're exercising. How does that all come into play?
The sad thing is that we make decisions based on fairy tales. As children, we're going to have the fairy tale wedding, whatever, Barry, that we never update. I saw one woman, I call her the Cinderella scientist, because she had this part of her that believed in Cinderella, and this part of her that was a PhD nuclear physicist, okay? But when she married her husband, she thought she was going to be Cinderella. And that you know, the shoe fit, and he was going to be a prince. And that was how sophisticated it was. I literally had her dialogue for me on a sheet of paper. I had her draw a line and say, what does Cinderella think is happening here? And what does the scientist think is happening here?
And what happened?
She was able to see. She goes, this is stupid. I think he's going to change. I think that he's going to all of a sudden transform. It's been 10 years. He's all of a sudden going to be someone different. I know he's going to turn into the prince. But the PhD in her goes, you know, this is how his family was. They were distant. They're non-communicative. Guess what? He's that way. He's always been that way.
Did they stay married or did they get divorced?
She wound up divorced. Now, sometimes people can change, you know, but it was too far gone. Let me say something about the pizza man here. Can I say something about the pizza man?
Okay, go ahead.
I've got to mention the pizza man because I always check out the pizza man. The pizza man had come to her, and let me tell you what I mean. A friend of mine, right before she got her divorce, she had told her husband for about 8 years, you never listen to me. You don't know what's important to me. You don't really know who I am. The last straw, and Barry, people can always tell me what the last straw is. They ordered a pizza.
Right.
She hates anchovies. He ordered an anchovy pizza. When the pizza man's come, you're absolutely calm. She sits there and she goes, you know what? That's the last pizza you'll ever order from me. He said, what are you talking about? She said, I'm leaving.
And he was flabbergasted.
He was flabbergasted. He was devastated. But see, that's what I mean about it. And to this woman, the Cinderella scientist, the pizza man had come to her too. She was just done.
Now, there's various stages to a relationship. In your book, The New Marriage, you talk about the valley and, let's see, the lowlands and a very dangerous place to succumb. What exactly do you mean?
Well, I use the metaphor in the book that it seems to me that a relationship is like two mountains with a valley in between it.
Okay.
The first mountain we go up as we grow up, and we learn things about marriage and about relationships, many of them dysfunctional, that we learn from our parents. We're not even conscious we learn them. But we're told when we get to the top of that mountain, we're going to fall in love and we're going to live happily ever after. No
That's
one
the
warns
princess.
you, no one warns you that you're going to descend, probably on your honeymoon, into the valley. And I call it the Valley of the Tigers, because that's where your issues from your childhood surface, like mine, needing to be understood. He wouldn't have seen that when we were dating. It's only once you're committed that all this comes out.
So that's why you would say that people who live together usually wind up getting divorced quicker than
Absolutely.
everybody else, because there's a different attachment.
Exactly. And once they have that other attachment, it seems that their bond isn't as strong. They feel like they can walk more easily. So in the Valley of the Tigers, you have to face those issues. If you don't, you'll just divorce and go right back up the mountain again and do it again until you get it, that they're powerful unconscious forces that you need to deal with.
Okay, so you've got the tigers. You also wrote about the shadow. All right. According to Carl Jung, inferior part of the personality, sum of all personal and collective psychic elements, which, because of their incompatibility with the chosen conscious attitude, are defined in a statement in life and therefore coalesce into a relatively autonomous splinter personality.
Fancy.
Fancy, fancy, fancy. Okay.
Let me simplify that.
Please.
The parts of our personality that were not acceptable to us, we put in a bag that we don't look at. We don't open it up because it wasn't acceptable. For example, in my case, I was the oldest child. It wasn't acceptable for me to be irresponsible. So the first relationship I got in was with the most irresponsible person in the world, because we are often drawn to our missing parts in other people.
Is that why it's called also mirroring?
Yes,
Because
absolutely, because you see yourself. I tell you, a good long-term relationship is a growing machine. You will see every last creepy shadow part that you have. And if you accept that and you're willing to look at it and your partner looks at it with you, you grow through it.
Okay, so in other words, if we're with a person that we don't like something about, it's actually something we don't like about ourselves.
Most of the time, not all the time. I would say about 98%
of the time.
If you ask yourself, what is it about this person that's getting on my last nerve?
Right.
You go, gee, do I do that? Do I interrupt people? Or do I talk too much? Or gee, am I too competitive? You'll realize it's about you. The stuff in our shadow, we've disowned.
Okay.
So, for example, we don't even know that that's about us. Let me give you a good example. When I went to grad school, I had the best supervisor, and he used to nail me to the wall about my cases. And one of the first couples I saw, poor things, she wanted out. The pizza man had come to her, and he was very committed. And so my parents were divorced, and I hadn't worked through all those issues. And so I'm ranting and raving, you know, she's not committed, she's not working on this, he's doing all the work and all that. And my supervisor said to me, he said, Linda, do you think you have any issues with a woman not being committed to a marriage? And as soon as he said it, I was like, oh my goodness.
The light bulb went off.
Yes. Really, Barrie, it's the willingness to look at ourselves. You know, in our book we have a journal where people keep a journal, and it's to get you to kind of nail your own self.
Well, let's talk about the journal.
Yes.
Okay, you tell people to keep a journal. It's almost like a diary of what's going on, and then you analyze it.
It's very user-friendly.
Okay.
Because you put 5 years on one page. So you go back 5 years later and you go, ah, I'm still stuck in the same issue.
Well, what do you write in the journal?
Okay, the first thing you write is what's most important that day.
All right.
So for example, you might say, I'm very depressed today because I broke up with Joe, okay? And then the second thing you put is whatever is important for you to say about that. But you don't go on and on, because you're going to put 5 years on one page. And so you say
you write
something
very
like,
small.
You say something like, well, what have I learned from this?
All right.
And then you put learnings like, Sometimes I have people put quotations they find or learnings or things they hear in therapy or sagey things, and it's, you know, I realize I picked a distancer man again. What is it that I pick men who are so distant? Why? What is it about them that's so attractive to me? And then the last thing you do is make your goal of where you want to be. And so you say, I now pick a man who is able to be close. And so the next year you look and you go, I picked another distancer. And then the next year, you know what I'm saying? And so it makes you be accountable to yourself.
Well, how do you change all these habits that you've grown up with? I mean, since the womb.
Not very easily, okay? You have to practice over and over in your mind. I have people draw a grid with 3 things on it. The first one is their attack thoughts. And our attack thoughts come from our childhood. It's like, he's not speaking to me. He's turning his back to me. It's a threat, but it's usually a threat from the past. Because if you're with someone who turns their back on you all the time, why are you with them? You know, and instead of screeching like an owl, why don't you go, gee, why am I with this person, okay? And then the second part is really saying, well, where did this threat come from? Why is it such a threat for someone to turn their back on me? What am I reliving? And then you start to remember the people that turned their back on you.
Okay,
and then you really grieve for what it really was.
Okay, so Linda, how do you turn it around?
You have to keep doing it over and over. And then your last column is, okay, what would a loving action be for myself and for others? And it is a practice. And Barry, that takes you to the higher part of your brain. See, when we are threatened, when people do things that threaten us, like if people turn their back on us and we want to screech, it's because we did have people turn their back on us. And so we're in a state of threat. And we can't, in our amygdala, in that part of our brain, we can't think of consequences. People who have strokes that knocks out their frontal lobe may still be brilliant. They may still have a great vocabulary, but they're mean as a snake. They can't look at social consequences. They just can't look.
Okay.
So we know you've got to get people to their frontal lobe. When you ask yourself the question, what constructive action can I take that's loving to me and to them? You can't ask that question with your amygdala. It can't go there. Our amygdala is fight or flight. So you're literally physiologically retraining your brain to go a different direction. It's like turning a steamship around, okay? So you keep doing it, and you just, when I first started training myself to do this, I'm telling you, I'd be just like shaking because I'd be reliving something. I'd just want to shriek and scream and be hysterical. And I would go, I know where this leads. I know where this leads. I'm not going to do it. So you have to have ways to go calm yourself down.
Wow.
Calm yourself down. Because what we do is we go after the other person until we've got them in their amygdala. And then we have 2 people messed up.
Real quickly.
Yes.
Connecting the dots.
Yes.
What is that all about?
Boy, is that important. I use that as a metaphor for clients.
Okay.
And I say, look, if you met this guy 5 weeks ago and you tell me you're going to marry him, let's say he's like one of those connect the dots books for children. Let's say he's got 100 dots. How many do you think you have? And they'll usually say something like 10. And I'll say, well, don't you think you need more?
Well, what's a dot?
Well, they're different parts of their personality. And you know what? We never have all our own dots, much less anybody else's dots.
What are some communication tips you would like to leave the audience with?
Take responsibility yourself. Complain and don't be critical. You know, really look at your own shadow. There's something called soft startup that Dr. Gottman talks about, which is an argument usually ends the way it starts. So you start with a soft voice. You don't start going, what did you do that for? That puts them right in their amygdala, and there you go. Okay? Yeah.
What is so important about dreams?
Well, Freud called dreams the royal road to the unconscious because they really tell us things that we're not conscious of. And I tell my clients often our dreams are out ahead of where we are.
So how do we find out?
They're leading you. Okay. Let me give you an example. Okay, often dreams are compensating, and you look at the characters who are in the dreams that are often parts of you, and you ask yourself, I wonder what that might be telling me. So let me give you an example of a woman who was in a dangerous situation, okay? She was in a very bad relationship, but she didn't want to face it. This man had hit her, and she was too passive about it. Her dreams were warning her. In her dreams, there were always men trying to break in.
Oh, interesting.
Often I find with women, when they're not using enough of their own masculine energy, taking enough action, they have compensatory dreams where they're men breaking in.
Okay, so what do we do about this? How do we find out what our dreams really mean?
Well, it's a very complicated thing. In our book, we have a section where it shows you how to begin to keep a dream diary and how to begin to look at those symbols and your associations with those symbols. It's sometimes people may want to go to a therapist if it gets really complex. But again, sometimes if you start with the question of what's going on in my life and what is it that I'm needing that the dream's leading me to.
Keep a dream journal. And what do you, in this journal, what do you do?
I have it in the book. It's in the appendix of the book. But what you're going to do is you're going to put down the dream. And by the way, you should keep something beside your bed because we forget the dreams within a couple of minutes after waking up.
Linda, thank you,
you are
so
so
much.
welcome. I enjoyed it.
It's been wonderful.
I enjoyed it.
And I hope you've enjoyed learning about the new marriage and maybe help you in your relationships. Love to hear from you, and you can probably find some information that Linda wrote on my website. So please check it out. Bye now. Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful having you.
It's been nice being here.
And are you following your dream and putting